Welcome, sir, and I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Kim to take us through your presentation and your talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you, although I wish I were there in person, but I'm glad at this opportunity to speak to you even virtually from the other side of the world. And I will indeed speak for about 10 or 12 minutes about climate and literature, which was the request made to me by the organizers of this conference, and I appreciate that very much because it is indeed my topic and now my life. So I'm a science fiction writer. That means I write stories that are set in the future. This is a strange project, but it's also a genre of literature, and human beings are always thinking about the future, so it's not an unnatural thing to set stories there. And naturally, when you set a story in the future, you reveal your hopes and your fears. And the hopes can be called utopian futures, the fears can be called dystopian futures. And we all have personal utopias and dystopias for our own lives. So again, this is a familiar thing. Now, I want to also say that the future is going to go out for a very long time. In the Buddhist cosmic calendar, we have many thousands of years, etc. In the scientists sometimes talk about 75 billion years, etc. If you say that this literary genre speaks are stories set in the future, they can be very different kinds of stories depending if you have set them in the far future or in the near future. And I want to say that if you set a story even next week, it's a science fiction story of a particular kind. You can call it near future science fiction. Then far future science fiction is like Star Trek, Star Wars, it's space opera. It's a form of magic. It's a fantasy space because we don't know what people will be like millions of years from now. Near future science fiction is a way of talking about right now with a little push to it to show the trajectories that we are on, the developments that seem to be happening a little more vividly and presently than they are now. It's like a modeling exercise. It's like a scenario building. And I will say that statements by the UN about how many people there will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, stock assessments, what kind of return on investment you're going to get if you put your money in one stock or another. These are all stories set in the future. They are near future science fiction stories. And I emphasize this because now, if you set stories in the near future, they have to be climate fiction. That's because we are in climate change already. The world's temperature has gone up. The temperature of the ocean has gone up. The chemical constitution of the atmosphere has changed, and it will continue to change. And we see the manifestations of this all over Earth already. So what used to be near future science fiction with a sort of range of possibilities, I'm thinking back to when I was young, the 1980s, the 1970s even, you could write a near future science fiction in which there were an ice age or in which the weather was not a concern whatsoever, that things were presumed to be the same at the planetary level. And you could talk about other manifestations of futurity, like technology and the changes in geopolitics and so forth. But now, no matter what kind of story you want to tell, climate change has taken over as the overriding consideration in any near future science fiction. So the value of writing a story set in a near future is not in being a prediction, a scenario, or one modeling exercise only gives you one particular example, and it is a particular of a generality that will not be the real future. It's just one possible scenario that you explore. The value of doing that in a work of literature is precisely the notion that you stay there for a while and you live inside it in your imagination in the form of a novel or maybe a movie. But I want to focus on the novel because the reader has to work to co-create the experience with the writer. If the reader doesn't make a generous application of time and imagination, the story doesn't come alive. If the reader makes that generous act of interpretation and creation, they have lived that future in their mind for some 20 or 30 hours. And when they come out of that experience, they are changed. And that's the value of climate literature. We can experience in advance of the fact what it would feel like to be in one sort of future or another. And this lived experience, which is fictional but real, will change the way you behave in the present now. You will avoid certain futures by your actions. You will work towards certain other futures by other kinds of actions, depending on whether you've read a positive story or a negative story. And if you read one that is mixed with lots of good and lots of bad, then it will feel like the present to you even more. And you know that in the present, as in that kind of a story, you have to sort it out. What made things good or what is making things bad. So I wrote The Ministry for the Future, and it was published 2.5 years ago. And ever since, I've been talking to people by Zoom like this, or going around the world in person, even to COP26, to Dharamsala to see the Dalai Lama, to Davos for the World Economic Forum, to New York and England. And everywhere, I see this. People want that positive story. They are hungry for it. They are aware of the danger that we're in as a civilization. If we ruin the biosphere, if we have runaway, if we break planetary boundaries and we have runaway hothouse effects, civilization itself will collapse in a mutual war of all against all. So when a story comes along that says it is dangerous, it will be troublesome, it won't go well, and yet it can still succeed, this is something that people are very hungry to imagine. So the generosity that has been offered towards the Ministry for the Future, I've seen it myself being at the center of that little storm. It is awe-inspiring, and I realize that the hunger is there. You have to be able to envision success for yourself and for your society to be able to work towards it coherently. So you need, these stories therefore need to have characters and plots like ordinary novels, like any realist novel, like any historical novel. The characters and plots are crucial because the reader invests their imagination into those very people. And one of the great powers of literature is that suddenly you're inside somebody else's head in a way that we can never be in real life. But in your imagination, you can. And the thick texture of a novel allows you to live inside someone else's mind for a while. And so characters and plots are crucial. There are many other ways to come at this. I am not making the claim that the novel is the only way, of course. But I will say that in our struggle to imagine what we need to do now, to imagine that what you do is a little brick in a big wall, or a tiny thread in some of the tapestries that you have in your country, or a piece of wood in the elaborate carvings, that you're one brick in a wall, but the wall really exists. It's everybody else in solidarity, working for the best for all. This is a story we co-create and that we need to have. So that's my description of what climate fiction is up to. And I am going to turn it back over to you and look forward to the following discussion. Thank you.